Hi everyone, I'm Juliet.
And I'm Peter.
And I'm a licensed therapist.
And this is very probably our last episode.
And welcome to Intrusive Plots, a podcast about OCD representation in movies and TV.
10 episodes.
10 episodes plus one mini-sode.
If we count Trap. Let's count Trap. 10 and a half episodes.
The best part about Trap is that we recorded like 3 episodes in one day. And Trap was, I think, the last one. So we were both kind of like, we got to talk more, but it worked out well.
Also, I was wearing my Christmas costume for the Trap minisode, and then if you go onto the YouTube, you'll see me wearing a Christmas sweater for our January episode and our February episode. That was not advisable.
You'll live and you'll learn. So today's a very, very special day for us because we are recording an episode on a very wonderful movie that also spurred the friendship that Peter and I share.
This will be a very tear-jerky episode. Lots of smiles, lots of, oh, remember that?
Yes. So if you have not watched Exposure yet, I want you to pause this.
Oh, man.
Go watch it. You can watch it on Amazon, Apple TV, Tubi, some other places
I've never had anyone market this hard for this movie before. Thank you, Juliet.
No, seriously, though, like, there are a lot of things that we're going to talk about from the movie that are spoilers. And if you have not seen it yet, I don't want the spoilers to be ruined before you watch it.
It's like in Matchstick Men, you know? It's like one of those type deals. So, yes, please go watch the movie. Give me those 3 cents that, like, Tubi will give me if you sit through the advertisements.
Is that what you make for Tubi?
I think one view is, like, a few cents. I don't know. I have to look closer at all that.
So go watch it, and then watch it on repeat, like, for 2 years straight, so Peter can make, like, $1 from it.
That's true, yeah.
So why don't you introduce the movie, in case anyone was like, what's the movie?
Oh, well, this movie's called Exposure. And if it weren't so clear, which I'm learning it may or may not be, but exposure is short for exposure response prevention therapy. And this is a movie that deals with that. It is at the same time this psychological thriller, but it's also the consequences of letting an obsession go untreated on both your personal life and really just everything around you. Yeah, and I worked on this thing for the first draft of this I wrote in 2020.
2023. So like
it premiered in 2023 and then it was released in 2024 and I think it's internationally available now for quote unquote the English speaking world. I don't know. I have to fly to England and try and watch my own movie.
Make it a business expense.
You just
put it on the LLC.
Yeah, right. It's weird, like, the further you get from something like this, because if you go back and you look at all the other times I've talked about this movie, and I have talked about this movie a lot, you see me with a lot of enthusiasm. You see me with a lot of energy, because that's the marketing juice. Once the movie's out, you gotta push it as much as you can, and, reach out to everybody. The further you get out from something like that, as the years go by, you can be a bit more objective about it. I do cringe a little less at my mistakes, but I still groan when I see them. And then I go, oh, you know what? That moment actually was pretty cool. You know, like I'm a bit more objective and it's all a little less charged. I was actually dreading watching this movie with Juliet yesterday, but I was like, yeah, you know what?
Let's do it.
Yeah, it was cool watching it a few years after the fact. Like I said before, we were getting this movie out to everywhere. It was really important to me that I get it in front of OCD therapists to kind of validate the portrayal of both the disorder and also exposure response prevention therapy and also the common problems and common issues people with OCD run into. And there's like this whole political piece next to it of mental health care and access to that and the quality of care that you get. And I had a therapist look over the script before, so I got the thumbs up to do that. That therapist was not my own, by the way. Relax.
You're like, hey, I'll pay you double. If
I'll pay you double.
And tell me it's good.
Look, it's a 2-hour movie. That's 2 hours of our time. I got to pay you twice the going rate. Clear your calendar.
That's how it works.
But when I was reaching out, I saw Juliet's handle, and so I reached out to her, and she was so kind in watching a movie she had no reason to watch. None of these people I sent it to had any reason to watch this movie, and they were also gracious and kind, and they did that, and I've gotten such a great reaction from it, for the most part anyway, and I really made some amazing friends, and that includes you, Juliet.
Are we friends?
I think we're friends. For the record, we've met in person once.
Well, when Peter reached out to me many years ago, when was it? 2023. It was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Because I was living in a hotel and Peter was like, hey, I made this movie. Would you want to check it out? I want to, hear what other mental health professionals, specifically OCD professionals, have to say about it. I was immediately like super touched because there was part of me that was like, wow, I must be really like an influencer now because people are...
I fucking made it.
People are reaching out to me because they want my opinions on things. That was honestly like the first thing. I was like tooting my own horn a little. And then I watched the movie and I was like, whoa, this is actually like really, really good. I didn't expect it to not be good.
I thought some art bro would just reach out to me and be like, oh, okay, yeah. You want the stamp of approval?
You never know. And when he reached out to me, when Peter reached out to me, your Instagram account for Exposure had like maybe like 10 posts on it. Like it was very early in the Exposure posting. So I really didn't know much about it. There were a couple images. Maybe there was like a brief trailer I saw, but I don't think I even watched the trailer before I watched the movie because I was like, I just want to see what this is about. I'll never forget, I was recovering from the stomach flu and it was a great blessing because I didn't have to paint my deck that day because I was sick and I didn't want to get my in-laws sick. So I was sitting in the hotel.
Oh, I didn't know you had the stomach flu when you watched this.
Sitting in the hotel with the stomach flu while like my wife and in-laws were like painting our deck in 99-degree weather. And I was just watching it and I was like, wow, this is like really great. And as I was watching it, I started to feel better physically too. So maybe Exposure like cured.
No, we cannot make the claim that this movie cures physical ailments or mental ailments for that reason. I guess the legal part of me still kicks in after all this time. I made like several posts being like, Exposure is a movie. A movie is not a therapist. Like I did so much cover my ass over.
It can't hurt.
This entire.
It really can't
you do
hurt.
it too. We do it for this podcast. Yeah.
What do you mean? I thought this was like therapy advice. I've been, instead of meeting with my clients, I just charge them my rate and say, go listen to the latest episode.
Well, guys, our time is up. We denied your insurance claim.
Okay, so let's get into Exposure. So we can start from the beginning and go through it. I've got a lot of questions for Peter. And it was also cool. I've never been able to watch a movie with the person who directed the movie. So the whole time we were watching, I was able to ask questions about like the OCD stuff. But honestly, a lot of my questions were like, is that beer real? Or how did you make
the answer is usually
smoke?
No, it's not real. Like most answers are usually no, it's not real. Did he really fall on his knees? No, he had knee pads on.
Whose house is that? Another thing I learned from watching this movie is that if I were to move to LA and get a property, maybe a house, maybe a shed, maybe anything, I could just rent it out for independent filmmakers to make movies.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
There's a lot of red tape attached to that. There's this whole part of Los Angeles that is dedicated to streamlining locations and making sure it's all above board. And there's a lot of red tape associated with it. And as a result, it gets very expensive to shoot in Los Angeles. So much so that the next movie we're doing will not be in Los Angeles.
All right. So one of the kind of beginning sequences, would you say the first scene, director question, is that a flashback? Is that just showing the viewer a little glimpse into what this character has experienced? When we see, because we see the character in... Okay. Yeah, you say it.
Okay. The first shot in this movie, and this shot was actually a lot of fun to get. The shot, it's funny because I tell everyone like, oh, it's a movie about OCD, and the first shot we see is like what looks like torture porn.
My God. Someone being kept against their will in a shed.
Yeah. But
I remember thinking, where is this gonna go?
Like, are we sure this is about OCD?
Is this the right one? The right movie?
The right Exposure? It's hysterical because we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but when I wrote Exposure, I'm like, okay, let's think of all these mental health movies that have happened. There is a certain kind of cap to suspense and excitement when it comes to mental health movies, because at the end of the day, if the character is experiencing a mental health episode of any kind, we know that it is pretty contained to inside their head and their actions, but also their head. And part of the OCD experience to me is not being 100% sure of how real the content is. And so I wanted to add a 100% real part of this so that the audience will forever be questioning, how much danger is this guy actually in? So at its core, it is a movie first. And from this traumatic incident of this guy getting inexplicably kidnapped and held in a shed for several days, he develops OCD from this traumatic experience. And it is a flashback. From about a couple years ago, yeah. So anyway, yeah, that's the line that I chose to kind of walk in this film, because you want the audience to actually be on their toes and not to be told that this guy is on his toes, you know?
It adds such a good investment for the audience, because I think a lot of times when we watch movies or TV shows about someone who's clearly struggling with like OCD, we're empathetic towards them, but we're also not like, oh my gosh, is this real? How much of this is real?
I'm looking at the shot. Yes. What's fun about this shot was this shot wasn't meant to be shot through the fan of the shed. I wanted to shoot this shot through a reflection of a piece of metal on said fan. To then catch the reflection of what was happening, have the metal be bent a little bit so that like right when our perpetrator like kneels down, we couldn't quite see his face. Ooh. We were pressed for time on the day, but when we got there, we're like, wait, outside this shed, there is this like elevated patch of land. Why not just put the camera there and shoot through the fan? And there's literally a person right next to this fan clicking the fan on and off to make sure that the blades are going right at the exact time. We just took out the sound of it going like on off, because if it was on the whole time, then it would be going so fast the camera wouldn't pick it up.
That's very cool.
Yeah, that's what a lot of this episode might be. It'll be like, oh, that moment, that was actually pretty cool how we did that.
Well, I learned that there are CGI flies in one scene, which
there are CGI. Cool. That is the dumbest part of this movie. There are a couple of really dumb parts of our movie. That is one of the dumbest parts of the movie.
You know, just going back to the trauma component in this film, another thing that we see pretty often with people with OCD is that sometimes a person experiences a traumatic event and then OCD is activated related to maybe the trauma brought it up, maybe there was a genetic predisposition, but the stress of the trauma leads someone to developing OCD. And what we often see is that, you know, nothing's off limits for OCD, and OCD attaches to the things that are the most like salient in our lives. So for some people, they can end up developing like obsessions and compulsions related to a real trauma that has happened in the past. And you know, that's something that we see pretty significantly throughout this film. Then we also see that the OCD and the obsessions and compulsions aren't all like 100% related to the trauma, but they all kind of go back to that as like a core possibility or a core fear.
It makes compulsions, they make sense to you right in the moment when you feel like you have to do them. And then you take 5 steps away and you're like, how would me checking to see if this water bottle I bought, how would this man feasibly get to this water bottle at this area and poison it, you know? Like, but when you're in the moment, it is so freaking difficult to see what a stretch some of these obsessions are, especially if you've just gone through the feedback loop of compulsions and compulsions and compulsions, you know? Which is where we start with our main character, Tanner. Tanner is played by Douglas Smith, and Tanner's wife, Nicole, is played by Margot Harshman. They are both incredibly talented, and it was really something special to be put right up against like all of this experience they had. There were moments where we were so pressed for time, and I'm like, I hope to God that Douglas like remembers every single piece of direction I gave for one take, and he just did, saving me a heart attack. Really some top-notch people we got to work with, and I'm really happy about that. Go ahead.
Are you purposely wearing the turtle shirt? Because you know I like turtles. Just say yes.
I'm wearing, yeah, sure. That's why. I wore it on the exposure episode and not the turtles all the way down episode.
So with the shooting timeline, how long did it take you to shoot all of exposure?
Oh, God. A wonderful thing called the coronavirus happened right in the middle. We were shooting in 2022, spring of 2022, and it was meant to go from May to June, and it was meant to be just over a month, but we had to shut down in the middle because a certain amount of crew and cast got COVID. So union rules say we shut down, so we shut down. And thankfully, everyone was still available. Thankfully, the locations didn't book themselves up with other shoots. We came back, we finished it up. But all in all, the actual production took about a month and a half.
Okay.
It's wild that there were some parts of this that we had more time to really get into the scene, and I'll point that scene out when we get there. And then most of this, we were like shooting 7 to 8 pages of script a day, which is bananas. You don't want to do that.
You don't do it, folks. Don't do it.
Not even once.
In case you're tempted, just don't.
Right, well, exactly. I mean, every producer will hear this and do it anyway. But you want to do like 4 or 5 pages a day, depending on the content of the script. There was so much going on in that house when we get to their house where it's like we were shooting one take of one shot and then we had to move on, and I just hoped to God it would cut together and work out. You know, we did end up losing some scenes. We cut a lot of scenes because they just didn't work. And thankfully, they weren't like load-bearing scenes that would make the movie not make sense. But as is the life of an indie filmmaker, there are a lot of subplots that don't get tied up, or there's a lot of references to things that just don't happen anymore in the movie because we cut them. And that is what it is to shoot 7 to 8 pages a day.
So to OCD, so when we first kind of get a glimpse that maybe our main character, Tanner, could be experiencing some heightened anxiety, maybe OCD. The second scene after the flashback, he's sitting at his office at work, just kind of doing his typing, and there's a cool subliminal message in there. Was that green screened on?
Yeah, it was green screened on.
I learned also when we watched this that all of the computers, or most of the computers, had like green screen images.
That's most computers, phones, and most movies
wild.
you watch.
So cool. But he's typing something, and then what was he trying to type?
So, like, he was trying to type the word position in context of something else, and then his mind just fills in the word poison.
Poison.
And he quickly, it's only like a minute into the movie, and then he quickly just edits it. It was kind of like when I'm really deep into sort of an obsession, and it colors in every waking moment of my life, I often read words wrong, write words that I didn't mean to write, say words out loud that I didn't mean to say, that are just related to the obsession in some way. It's like my brain expects to hear or read or say a certain word related to said obsession, and so my brain just does it. And I believe other people will go through this as well, but I wanted to put that in there.
Yes, I love that. A general kind of obsession that we start to learn about as we watch maybe like the first 20, 25 minutes of this film is that our main character has a very, very, very significant fear of being poisoned. And this leads him to meticulously analyze all of the things that he is eating and drinking. It leads him to be very hyper aware of his body, so frequently going to the doctor. Then he starts taking charcoal pills just in case he gets poisoned to help that not become permanent. We see him really restricting his food to everything has to be canned. So we see cupboard full of canned food as well as plastic water bottles. But this isn't even enough. Then we see kind of more and more anxiety coming in and more restriction in his environment. Can you talk about the boarding scene?
Yeah, so a little later in the movie, originally there were a lot of OCD dreams kind of worked into this movie. A couple of them got cut because they just simply didn't work. But one that made it in there was a particularly nasty dream where you'll have to watch the movie, but it's a scary bit. And he decides that, like, in his head, his house isn't safe as is, and he has to board up his house while his wife is out at work. And there's this montage scene of just him just drilling boards into it. He's testing the strength of his door by kicking it. He's tossing every half-open thing, every open piece of food in the trash just in case his kidnapper already got to the food in the fridge. He does all this under the pretense that it'll make him safer from this guy. And his wife shows up, and it's a really kind of sad and frustrating moment because he can't work. He loses the job that he has, all financial burdens on his wife. And if you're in that position, not only do you have to have the real kind of conversation with yourself is like how feasible is this, but you start having thoughts like, is this life now? Nicole in this situation took a job that is really kind of meant for like entry-level culinary job, you know? In my mind, she wanted to sort of start like a culinary career, and she was relying on Tanner's income to be able to make less money as she got into it. But then suddenly this happens, and there's just a lot of moments of, I expected things would be different. And it's not like Tanner can't see that.
It's pretty clear as we learn more about Tanner and the extent of his OCD, the impact it has on his relationship and on his wife. And I thought you did a good job showing some of the ways that if there's not like open communication, and if both parties in a relationship, when one person has OCD, if there's not kind of a honesty in terms of like how it's impacting each of them.
In this movie, they're just lying to each other.
It's
they're
a recipe for even more resentment and conflict. And there's also this component of their relationship where Nicole has this kind of caretaking role, and she tries to help Tanner, but her way of helping ends up kind of reinforcing all of his compulsions.
And how would she know? How would she know that she's not supposed to do that? Anyone with a regular brain that doesn't know much about OCD would be like, yeah, of course I'll say that you're safe here with me. Of course we'll do that if it makes
canned soup and make sure that it's sealed before I open it.
But I was laughing because when Juliet and I were watching this, these two people just like can't tell the truth to each other for different reasons, and it's just two people lying to each other pretty much the whole movie. Juliet was like, take a shot every time they tell a lie to each other. And I literally remember there was a scene at the table when they were eating breakfast, like halfway through the movie. We were shooting it, and Margot, who plays Nicole, goes, Jesus Christ, I gotta keep my lies straight, you know?
I love that. I love that. You did emphasize just the significant impact OCD can have on a relationship.
In the mental health world, a lot of this stuff is geared towards, these illnesses, these things, these behaviors, you know, they come from a certain place, and we need to be uplifting to these people that are suffering. This movie acknowledges that, but I think the more prominent point this movie tries to make is that there is an element of personal responsibility to this. There's a quote that goes around the internet that I kind of adapted in one of the scenes of the movie that says, mental illness isn't your fault, but it is your responsibility. Mm-hmm. And Nicole not having her own personal career marital needs met, like that's equally as bad, because marriage is a partnership that you go into equally. And just because one person has a mental illness that they can't control doesn't mean that it's not on him to work that out. And it is demoralizing. It's sometimes been demoralizing for me to hear that, but at the same time, people are people, and there is a limit to what someone can give in a marriage and in a relationship. And yeah, it hurts, but it's also a reality. And I feel like that's a lot of what I want to try to get across in this movie. There is an element of personal responsibility to it.
And it's only when Tanner does start to have his own sense of like, no, I need to do this. You know, initially the catalyst is Nicole kind of breaking down and being really very upfront about how much this is impacting her. But then once Tanner does start to learn more and take some of this into his own hands, we do see him getting that sense of accomplishment. And without that, like if she was the one who was just like, you need to go, we'll talk about the group.
Sure.
We can talk about this
we'll
more.
talk about all that, but like you are right in the sense that after, okay, spoiler alert, he does an exposure ladder in the movie. But it's always like so funny from an outside perspective when someone does a completely asinine action and goes, yeah, I conquered that, I feel invincible, you know? But I think the first time we see an exposure is when one of the side characters, Izzy, played by Ryan Whitney, who has a contamination compulsion, gets into a trash can, and everyone's hyping it up like it's this giant thing, and then the leader of the group just rolls out the trash can, and the main character's like, what the hell am I looking at? Actively starts laughing at the situation, but like it can feel like, yeah, I conquered this personal demon, I'm such a badass, and that win will only be for you, you know?
Yes. Yeah, and even as we see some of the other characters conquering their own fears with exposures, to all the other people in the group, they're like, yeah, just do it. Like, what's the big deal? Obviously more empathetic than that, but to each of them, it is the hardest thing in the world.
Yeah, there's this one moment, there's this character, Charlie, played by Alex Feldman, and I loved working with that guy. I would walk into fire for Alex Feldman.
Aw.
Yeah, right?
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Alex. But there's this one line where, so the leader of the group tells Tanner, like, do what Izzy did, you know? Like, that's all you have to do. And Tanner goes, what, stand in a trash can? And then Alex just goes, yeah, it's that easy. That one moment was just delivered so well because he knows that Tanner's about to enter a world of hurt and Tanner has no fucking idea yet, you know? It's so easy and asinine to everybody around the situation except for you. For you, it is the hardest thing you'll ever have to do.
Shortly into the film, after Tanner starts to see, like, things are not getting better, they are actually getting worse. And every day he goes without some sort of treatment, it's just going to make it harder. So initially, Nicole brings him to a support group. There's a bit of surprise and confusion for Tanner why he's there. And tell us more about how it was to kind of write these side characters, to show this OCD support group that also always happens like very late at night in a very like, as you, what did they say about the area?
Some people have work and school. Yeah, it happens at very late at night at a church. A lot of churches have like community events or like Alcoholics Anonymous or stuff like that.
It has a very edgy feel to the group.
Very ragtag.
Yeah. So tell us about what it was like writing that and then filming that.
You'll think this is funny. I don't think I've told you this before. Oh, yeah, I'm getting the good shit.
Something different.
Exclusive. Yeah. So a few years ago, before I knew what the IOCDF was, they held a conference in Texas. And I was Googling like OCD nonprofit or whatever. Like I was trying to figure out like what the presence was while I was writing this movie. And I saw the logo for the IOCDF conference in Texas. And it was a giant boot with a spur right next to it. And it was like, come on down to the OCD conference. Like, and I thought that was so funny because what most people think when they think of the person that has OCD is not like a Southern dude, you know, like it's always some like East Coaster, like mousy neurotic guy, usually on the younger side. That's a lot of what I wanted to get rid of. So when I saw like goofy boot with a spur OCD con, I was laughing to myself. So I wrote this character, Pat, this Southern dad, being like, yeah, this is what OCD can look like. Just some old marshmallow of a dude, you know?
You know, actually, I already knew that.
Oh, I told you? All right, well, I'm going to cut out that you already knew that and then pretend like I just said it for the first time.
Let's pretend like I'm really like...
Yeah, you can do. You can do a take.
Ooh and ah. Yeah.
Ooh and ah.
That is so funny because when I first watched
Okay. Great.
When I first watched it, I was like, "This is a really interesting choice for the group leader." Like, I wonder where the inspiration came for Pat. So, thank you for sharing. And it does go to show.
So believable.
Literally anybody can have OCD.
In this group, the reason this group exists, because there are a lot of support groups that are a bit more legit. They're run by actual licensed professionals, and this movie encourages that. The reason this group exists is because they live not only in an area with not a lot of these resources available, but none of them have the proper insurance. And I know a lot of people listening to this, if you have OCD, you've known the dance you've had to do to get insurance to sign off on this, you know? A lot of times it just doesn't happen. A lot of times it doesn't happen for regular therapists, but so specialists is asking a lot, and it shouldn't be. So what can you possibly do? Find other people that have it in your community, and I guess from the third-hand knowledge of what these treatments are, try and do it yourselves. And we see that there are upsides and there are some big downsides for that.
What would you say are the biggest upsides and downsides that you wanted to portray in exposure with this? With
this group in particular, like, there's a lot of gaps in knowledge that they have. There's an entire scene where a person's talking about their, and we'll get to the scene, but there's an entire scene where a person's talking about their sexual orientation obsession, and one of the other people in the group takes that really badly and sees it as just garden variety homophobia. And an actual licensed professional, if they were there, they'd be like, okay, like this is a sticky situation. However, this is, like content is irrelevant. It's all OCD, like all the stuff that you can have access to now. Maybe all these people should just download Instagram.
You could edit the movie in the group, just put my Instagram handle somewhere in there. And then be like, just look at that.
Just click on that one. Just click, like you'll see some TikTok dances and you'll know everything you need to know about OCD.
Yes.
No, but there are upsides in which that it's affordable, and these people genuinely care about each other and they show up for each other and they're willing to do exposures for each other, which is a thing that actually happens in some of these other groups. And a sense of community, and I know you know this, and I know everyone listening to this knows this, a sense of community for people with OCD is so important too.
Absolutely.
But there are just gaps in this. Sometimes there's information they get wrong. Sometimes it leads Tanner to believe that, oh, I feel great after this exposure. Now I need to start upping the ante. I need to start doing things that raise the stakes, because the closer I get to all this anxiety, the worse I feel, the better I'll feel right after. And everyone starts to go, should he be doing that? That's where kind of the suspense starts to rise in this movie.
Some of the other questions I asked Peter while we were watching were, is that a real gun? Can you talk about
No.
It was not a real gun.
It was not.
But can you talk about your thought process behind like writing that part into Exposure?
So we talked a little about this in, I think, the Monk movie episode, or maybe Matchstick Men.
One of our countless podcast
One of our 9 others.
in the archives.
Don't say countless, then people will be like, oh, it's too many, I can't listen. No, it's very manageable. You can do it in a day. We talked about how suicidality and suicidal ideation doesn't show up in the same way in OCD than it does in depression and other instances of mental health, because a lot of people feel that when it comes to OCD, compulsions are a protective measure. And there can be unintended consequences, unintended hurt, unintended injury from those things. But when he buys the gun, it's to make himself feel safer, to give him a first line of defense or a last line of defense against this guy that he knows is just coming for him. And of course, not telling his wife and having a shotgun he barely knows how to use in the house, that just increases the danger of the situation tenfold. It's not necessarily suicidal ideation. It is a preventative measure that might have some awful consequences. And we get very close to that line in this movie as the movie goes on.
And when we're working with someone with like OCD and they're so consumed by their obsessions, the risk is that there could be some sort of moment or a way where like they're so distressed and they're so kind of believing whatever their obsession is that if they were to have a gun, that could lead to like an unintended consequence. Yeah. And when I saw that scene and he's getting a gun, I thought, oh God, like this is not good. This is not going to be good.
No, in no situation is that good.
Yes. And then there's a dream sequence where we see one of those, possible consequences that could come from having fear and having a gun and not fully being aware of how that could play out. Can you talk about the amazing special effect from that?
Yes. Okay, so there's a really dark scene that we had to pull off in a really funny way. All right, so, so it is haha, actually. Okay, so in this scene, super duper spoiler alert, he has this OCD-induced dream where he believes he accidentally shot his own wife, and it's a really upsetting few seconds of a scene.
And also, if you're watching for the first time and you don't know it's a dream, you're like, is this a dream? Is this real? Oh my God, where is this going to go?
I also wanted to acknowledge to the audience, like, yeah, I know your brain's kind of going this direction. If we have a movie about a man with this mental illness that is not telling anything to his wife and getting a gun, I know what you think might happen. And I want to acknowledge to you that, yeah, I know that you know that, So with this dream sequence, I'm like, this is the arena we're entering into now. So with this dream sequence, he notices, and it's kind of like this spooky reverse kind of way where, I've noticed that the gun is smoking, and I've noticed that the shells have been fired. So there is a shot.
When I learned this, I was like, LOL, that's funny.
There's a shot of the 2 barrels of the shotgun smoking. Originally, what we were going to do was we were going to slide a couple of like smoke pellets of some kind into the barrel and then just have it like that. And for some reason, we couldn't get that together in time. So what we did instead was we had our art director, Tyler, take a rip of his vape, blow it into the barrels of the gun. We'd move the gun into the camera. We'd get the shot. We'd do it again. We'd make that poor man take a fat rip of his vape, blow it into the barrels, and do the take again. And I saw the light leave his eyes like 3 rips in. And Tyler, if for whatever reason you're watching this, thank you. You helped us create a very good scene. But hey, it worked out really well. And then like the smoke from the spent shells was CGI, but Tyler really saved us some money by making that vaping shotgun authentic.
So one of the kind of main aspects of Tanner's exposure hierarchy is that he is working to face his fears related to, you know, this traumatic incident that happened where he was kidnapped and then held against his will for some amount of time by this unknown perpetrator.
Question mark guy. Yeah.
Yes. And initially in the movie, we learn from Tanner's wife that the perpetrator has been released and he's on parole. And she shares with Tanner, like, I'm telling you this. He's in Michigan, so he's not going to hurt you at all. But, you know, he is out there. And this is one of the things that really leads Tanner to, I think that's what leads him to board up the house, to kind of really take things to the next level with
that plus the dream.
The dream plus getting the gun. So throughout the movie, we see him doing really good work to not let the fear of, you know, this person or being poisoned stop him. So he starts to do things like go to the scene of where the abduction was. And he learns that, okay, I did it. It was scary, but I'm okay. And then he starts, as Peter mentioned, he starts to kind of push the boundaries of like, what's an exposure versus what is actually like a risky behavior.
If they had a therapist, if they had any kind of real therapist to be like, whoa, don't do that, this movie would be solved so quickly.
Like a lower level exposure is like, look at a picture of the guy.
Yeah, totally controlled environment.
Yeah,
like, you know,
looks at the picture, gets really freaked out, then he's okay.
It goes, look at a picture of the guy, stand where the abduction was in the middle of the night, look at the case files of the crime, which you realize is this isn't triggering enough to me. I've already stood where it happened, so I need to go harder. So that kind of catapults him. Right. He goes and he spends the night at the place where he was being held, unbeknownst to anybody, until the group finds out later. They start yelling at him, going, what the hell are you doing?
What are you doing? That's terrible.
That's terrible. Don't do that. And he's like, yeah, but I feel great, you know? And finally, he tells his wife, like, I gotta hear this guy's voice. And she's like, absolutely not. He almost ruined our lives. What are you talking? Did your group tell you to do this? They're not doctors, you know? Like, and he's like, yeah, but you told me to do this, and I see the light now. And
he's like, it's working. If it was terrible, why would it be working?
Why would it work so well? That's when the audience is going like, uh-oh, this is really not going to end well. He does call somebody on the other line picks up, and he has a brief conversation. He pretends to be like a spam call, a solicitor of some kind. And then seemingly everything's okay. Seemingly.
Prior to Tanner like taking the dial on exposure response prevention and turning it to like the max where it's not really appropriate and could be really dangerous, we do see him starting to feel better. He starts to be able to eat food that is not from a can. He is able to like reconnect with his wife in ways that are a lot more kind of like, we are on the same page versus you are taking care of me. We see him like going out with some of his wife's friends, and, you know, he's drinking some sort of drink there. It was a
glass of wine.
Was it real wine?
No. Why would it be real wine?
I don't know.
What was it, like 9 a.m?
You never know. I don't know how film works. And we see him really starting to feel more confident. Like there's this part where there's this van by the restaurant, and one of the people at the table is like, hey, Tanner, don't look over there. Which I'm like, damn, that is...
It was such a dark, fucked up joke to make, but it was really funny because, okay.
His abduction, he was pushed into a van.
His wife's friend is like dangling a painful memory in front of him in a very fucked up, morbid way. I get a shock laugh every time we watch that. But despite it being a sucker punch, we see that Tanner handles it really well and even goes along with it, you know?
Another part we didn't mention, but I think it's important to talk about, is early on in the film, there's a scene where Nicole goes out to dinner with some of her work colleagues. And at the dinner, she kind of starts to confide in them a little bit about what's going on at home and about how much Tanner is struggling. And she describes what he's going through as like a severe phobia.
She's
right?
like, he's got like a really intense phobia. Yeah.
Phobia. And someone says, oh, like a fear of heights? Then she's like, you know, totally straight face. Like, no, he has a fear that someone's going to break into the house and put poison in his food and kill him. And I loved that scene because it was like, you could see on their faces, they're like, huh? And it was kind of funny. But then she's like, no, I'm serious. Like, that's what he's worried about. And they're like, oh.
In a very early draft of this movie, and I wanted to try and work this in, but I ended up not being able to, was like, there would be some conversation about like, food poisoning, and her work friends would not sure, like, oh, is this okay to do? And she immediately knows the answer in great detail because she has heard this so many times from her husband, and they all like turn to look at her and be like, how do you know what the spoilage date of that obscure food is?
That would have been so niche. I would have loved that.
Yeah.
Like the random things you learn because of OCD or because you know someone with OCD around something.
Because you've gone through much of that shit, you know? Okay, cool. Now I know all about this. There is a moment where that character like snickers and then doesn't. I love that moment. That made it into the trailer. That's how much I love that moment.
It does really show, like, for folks who have OCD, like, sometimes you'll try and describe, like, your obsession to someone who doesn't have OCD. And it can feel like that, where they're like, oh, what are you worried about? Like, I don't know, getting fired. And you're like, no, I'm actually worried that, like, maybe this is all a simulation and that, like, if I don't do this certain thing, nothing will be real ever again. And they're like, huh? Like, what about spiders?
Yeah, right? Like, I thought it'd be like scary movies or something.
Or when they're like, oh, but you're not afraid of germs. And you're like, no, you don't get it. Like, I'm trying to explain it to you, but you just don't understand. That scene, I was like, haha, that's really relatable.
Every time you meet somebody new and you have to explain OCD for them, like every time somebody says, I'm a little OCD or whatever, and they don't have OCD, you're like, okay, I can do two things here. I can just like not pay attention to it because I don't want to spend 20 minutes talking about this. Or I can open this can of worms, go, you know, that's actually not what OCD is, and it's my responsibility. You know, like, it's freaking exhausting is what it is. But there is one moment in the movie, late in the movie, where that character says, I'm obsessed with your wife's cooking. And he's like, shut the fuck up.
Throughout the movie, you don't say obsessive compulsive disorder or OCD.
Nope.
Why did you decide to leave that out?
Just because, like, there's so much terminology and jargon. The first or second draft of this, I showed it to my wife, and she was like, Peter, this reads like a textbook. This is so boring, you know?
Yeah.
One of the big things you have to do with film is show, don't tell. And I would so much rather feel the moments where he feels immediately better by drinking from a water bottle and not his Go cup, and then having the fear immediately come back to him, then explain in detail the temporary nature of feeling better after a compulsion. I say the word compulsion, I say the word obsession, I don't say ERP, I don't say OCD, I don't say ICBT, even though there is a CBT moment in the movie, they talk about a grounding exercise. You know, like, I felt like it would be such a turnoff because it's not just people with OCD watching this. It's people that want to see a thriller movie, and there is nobody on this planet that likes being preached to, especially when they go in not expecting it. Like, no one's going to turn this movie on and say, oh, I feel like it's important to watch. Like, nobody's busting down the doors to see that, you know?
Maybe someone now, because they started our podcast, and they were like, wait, this is important to watch because I want to know
I got to do my homework.
Yeah.
I got to do my intrusive plots homework. Better watch Exposure and the Monk movie.
And listen to all of our 10.5 episodes.
All 10.5 episodes. But, like, that's essentially it. Like, I wanted to make people feel it in a way that still was entertainment. If you really wanted real education on OCD, you have so many other avenues for that. This is a movie. Movies
Yeah, and if you're
do have to be fun.
using a movie to get your primary education on OCD, like that's just gonna fall short no matter what.
I think movies are a door. Like their entertainment is a door to look up more stuff about it after if you want to. But really, this is a story about a man who faces his fear, stops pushing his reliances on other people, and learns to take responsibility for himself. You know, that's what this movie's about. Yeah, it's about OCD, but it's really about Tanner's journey.
And Tanner has a moment where he is pretty flabbergasted. Can we talk about A Midsummer's Night's Dream?
Midsummer Night's Dream. Okay, so to talk about this, we have to talk about Charlie. So, Charlie, played by Alex Feldman, is a character with a sexual orientation obsession. And every once in a while, I'll go back and forth on whether I should have included a sexual orientation obsession because it is so out of left field for a lot of people that don't know much about OCD. And then in my mind, I'm like, nope, we got to do it because it's part of OCD. So halfway through the movie, he, in a moment of vulnerability, reveals that his obsession is that he might not be straight. He might be a gay man. And an actually gay person at the table takes a lot of offense to this because it implies all kinds of things like, oh, being gay terrifies you because gay people are so horrible. And like all the things you might take from that conversation. And he goes, no, it's more about how I don't want to lose everything I've had based off this identity I thought I had, you know, like much like OCD. The conversation does not end well. As the movie goes on, he starts an exposure ladder, much like Tanner does, much like other people. And towards the top of this exposure ladder, by the way, these exposures are kind of silly. This subplot is played for laughs a little bit because I think it's okay to laugh at mental illness. If you're not getting anything wrong, you know?
The scenes of the other group members' exposures are like such good comedic relief because you're like sitting on the edge of your seat and you're like, oh man, this is really stressful. And then there's like a flash to someone doing an exposure and you're like, LOL, I relate to that. Also, this is a nice like little breather from the like, there's a gun and there's someone not answering their phone calls and
exactly
and kidnapping. Like, yeah.
But one of the things I've found so interesting about sexual orientation obsessions is that the people that are suffering from that have such a skewed idea of what being queer is. A lot of it is othering kind of force where it's like, oh, when you're constantly comparing yourself, like, am I this or am I that? They'll take all the stereotypical qualities. So like, oh, if I wear clothes that are too tight, it means I'm not straight. It means I'm gay.
If I listen to pop music.
If I listen to pop music or music that's too feminine, it means I'm gay.
If I drink a Cosmo.
If you drink a Cosmo, yeah. So the scene where this is revealed is at this grungy bar with this like heavy masculine Fight Club-esque guitar going like you know, it's got like this girl going around with big things of beer. It's Charlie, a couple of like 22-year-olds, and Tanner, and they're so out of place because this bar is the epitome of I'm not gay. And Alex and I would make jokes about this being like, oh yeah, but I'm not gay, you know, like on set, you know. Now, as the movie goes on, he starts doing these exposures that are kind of silly because they are making him face this distorted view of being gay that he's built up in his head. Like he has to wear clothes that fit, you know, like at the very, very top, he does a Shakespeare play. That's it. That's the exposure.
He's in costume.
That's it.
It's a Midsummer's Night's Dream. A Midsummer's Night.
A Midsummer Night's Dream.
Midsummer Night Dream.
A Midsummer Night's Dream.
A Midsummer Night's Dream.
A Midsummer Night Dreams.
A Midsummer's Night's Dream. Duh.
All right, this bit is expired. But like whatever this man's sexuality is irrelevant. He's able to exist with these things that cause this much anxiety, and his anxiety levels go down, and voila, that's exposure response prevention therapy. Even though it is out there and the character that's actually LGBT has a hard time with it at first because it just seems condescending and homophobic. And when I was writing this into the movie, there was this whole rabbit hole online. I think that rabbit hole is largely gone, especially because a lot of folks are like, oh, well, people that are queer might be worried that they're in fact not queer. And then it gets about like losing my identity again. You know, it's the same, but in reverse. But there were a lot of people online that were being like, motherfucker, I'm worried that I'm going to die What, are you worried about being gay? Like, fuck you, you know? Like, there's a lot of charged emotions next to that. There were a lot of really old forums back in the day called, like, stuckinadoorway.org. I don't think Stuck in a Doorway is around anymore, but it was, like, in the 2000s.
Okay.
These discussions were being had, but it was, like, the Wild West because, again, nobody had a therapist right there.
That is not how my Patreon is, by the way. Well, it also used to be called, like, homosexual OCD. So, like, HOCD.
Yeah.
So once they changed it to, like, sexual orientation OCD, and lots of people with very different, like, sexual orientations came out and were like, hey, I worry about the possibility that I could maybe not be a bisexual person, or I worry that I'm actually straight. Then people started to realize it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be rooted in homophobia. It's literally just another subtype of OCD. But if you don't understand OCD, there can be this initial response of like, oh, but like, what's so bad about that?
It doesn't help that the DSMs had homosexuality as a mental illness for so long, you know?
Yes.
All the history attached to it, you know? Of course the reaction's like that. So
the exposure group goes to support. Then we hear this like very theatrical like drum beat, like drum, dum, dum. And it starts to feel like, oh, someone is walking on stage and this is going to be like significant. And the person who walks out on stage in costume looks very, very similar to the person in the mugshot that Nicole showed Tanner, saying that was Tanner's kidnapper. And everyone, as in everyone in the audience who's watching the movie, is like, what? How did his kidnapper get involved in theater?
How did he do they not do background checks for local Shakespeare theater? They definitely don't.
And we see Tanner start to spiral.
So essentially what happens next is he darts out of that room, tries to call Nicole. Nicole does not pick up. He starts heading home immediately because a lot of stuff starts making sense to him. Nicole being very withholding of the information. She explained that away by being like, look, I didn't think you could handle it, or we have to control this because these are exposures, so I'm not giving you this information. But the person that he talked to on the phone, he confronts that person, and that person is an actor hired by his wife to be this controlled environment for him without his knowledge. And so he's racing home, and a lot of stuff starts making sense, being like, I'm going to take care of you. You don't have to worry about any of that. Like all these flashbacks of the things Nicole said, all the ways that Nicole being this caretaker kind of took the choice out of his hands.
Disempowered him.
Basically lied to him in order to make him feel better. And then the question comes up, well, why would she feel the need to do that if this guy's in Michigan? He goes home. He confronts her in this very large way.
This part was crazy.
He kicks all of her coworkers out, get the fuck out of my house and all that, and says, like, why did you make a fake mugshot in the first place? Like, why did you hire an actor? Why did you do all of these things? And
well, she's like, think of the worst case, Tanner. Think of the worst
possible scenario. You're good at that. That's very OCD adjacent.
It literally is the worst case scenario, though.
It is literally the worst case scenario. Throughout the movie, he was absolutely convinced that this perpetrator had red hair. It shows up in all of his dreams. It shows up in all of his memories, descriptions. As it turns out, he thought this man had red hair because he only ever stood under an orange light, and his memories, after tons and tons of times of being pored over and obsessed over, have warped, because OCD is not a very reliable thing, is it? As it turns out, the man is not in Michigan. He has seen this man. This man works at the local grocery store. And at that moment, Tanner starts a spiral that lasts a couple days, which kind of envelops the third act of the movie. It's where all of the almost violence happens.
It's where we see Tanner falling right back into that. You see, I knew it this whole time. I was positive that I was being poisoned. I knew it wasn't anxiety or OCD. I knew this was legitimate. And all the kind of work he's done with the exposures are like, no, that's irrelevant, because now, once again, there is this real threat that was right under my nose the whole time.
I'm not sure if I meant to do this, but it reminds me a bit of the scene in A Beautiful Mind. Like, regardless of the accuracy of that movie, for whatever reason, like, just put that aside for a second. There's this moment where after he's been told he has had schizophrenia, after he's done all this work, he goes into like the back room and like all the CIA agents are there being like, yeah, this is all a psyop, man. You got to get back to work. And he says, I was so scared you weren't real. It's like such an emotional moment. Now, obviously, it's not relief, it's panic for Tanner, but it's how easy you slip right back into it.
Yeah, and it's like all of the evidence against an obsession. It's like as soon as you're back in it, it's like, oh, but I don't believe that still. Even though I've been eating food that's not out of a can for weeks and nothing has happened. And even though, I'm living my life again, nope, better be careful because it still probably was happening and will happen again.
Well, yeah, because he's biding his time. Like, yeah, of course he didn't poison me then, but now that I know, he'll be rushed to poison me now. Obsessions can find any way to rationalize why things did or didn't happen. So he produces the gun, which his wife has not seen. He kept it in a hiding place. He almost pulls it on her. He does pull it on her. He almost shoots her. And it's a really upsetting moment. And she leaves. Of course, he's not thinking about that right now. He's thinking about this guy that's very clearly about to get him. She stays at one of her coworkers' place, and then Pat, who noticed that he ran out of that show, the next day comes looking for him. This is where the third act of the movie kind of starts, where it's like, now it's kind of a race against time to make sure Tanner doesn't hurt anyone or himself. And we've all seen The Shining. There's this one scene in The Shining where, like, spoiler alert from this movie from the 70s, the caretaker, like, travels across the country only to get axed in the face by Jack Nicholson.
Yes.
Basically, when Pat goes into the house, you'll notice it's all in, like, one slow shot where he's like, Tanner? He sees the food that was out that wasn't cleaned up. This is where a CGI fly comes in, by the way.
CG fly comes in.
CG fly. Yeah, so essentially in Los Angeles, there are bugs everywhere all the time, especially when you're shooting and you never want them to be there. The one freaking time I wanted a fly in the shot for that food, there were none to be found. And I was so irrationally angry about that. I had to pay money for a VFX artist to put a fly in that freaking shot. Thankfully, Tanner does not shoot Pat on accident. Pat senses something is off, but Tanner assures him enough so that Pat leaves. But Pat does call Nicole and be like, hey, what's going on? Nicole is like, yeah, we might be separating. And Pat goes, oh, no.
He turns around right away.
Yeah.
Like, gotta get back.
Yeah.
But he's also trying not to freak Nicole out. So he's like, okay, thank you.
The next 30 minutes are just like intense music. And my composer, Miller, is an absolute pro. He's like going crazy on his cello and hired various musicians. Like it really elevated the next 20-minute long sequence. And Tanner believes that the way that he can quote unquote be sure, he doesn't, why would I have to live on the edge of uncertainty if I didn't have to? If this guy's dead, I can be sure he's never going to get me. So he is like, I'm going to go kill this guy now. I know where he is. I know where he works. I'm going to follow him home. I'm going to kill him. Just to be sure that he'll never get me. The whole thing becomes a race against time. A race that ultimately fails. Pat cannot get in touch with Nicole again because her coworkers are suggesting that she just put the phone down. Like, hey, listen, well, from their perspective, all you know about someone is, my coworker, her husband pulled a gun on her. Hey, how about you leave him? And how about we protect you from all of that? Like, that's perfectly rational, even though we're just like, we know all this other stuff's going on.
She's got to answer the phone.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, like, they're like, what if he does it again? And at the time, Juliet was like, oh, come on, I hate this person. I'm like, look what we're cutting to. We're cutting to Tanner running around with a shotgun going like, I knew you were poisoning me, like... It's funny how we're biased to protagonists. But yeah, so the race against time eventually fails. Nicole does not pick up the phone. And Tanner is about to kill this man. And in an episode of Begging, this man reveals that the reason he kidnapped Tanner in the first place was because he was going through meth psychosis, which spurs obsessions, sometimes permanent OCD, but during meth psychosis, a lot of it is like, there's someone out to get me. There's someone following me, which is very similar to what Tanner had gone through. Tanner gets a look in the mirror moment just for a second, and it kind of takes him out of that. He does the one CBT thing that was kind of taught to him, but not really. Again, if there was a therapist, like, there's a place for CBT, yada, yada, yada. Like, he kind of offhand heard about it. But he does that version of it. He does feel better, and he just unlocks the door of the shed and goes home. And when you relapse in OCD, it's not like all the work that you've done disappears. Mm-hmm. All that work is still valid. It's just a relapse, and relapses are nasty, but they do end. It's not like, oh, I lost everything, even though it could feel like that in the moment. Mm-hmm. He comes home. Nicole is back. She wants to reconcile. She feels so awful about turning her phone off.
She's like, it's my fault. I should.
All my fault. Yeah.
And then
Tanner basically like lets her go. Listen, like all of this wasn't the marriage that you signed up for when you married me, and that's okay. Like I can't give you this thing that you want because this thing isn't going away, you know?
And I don't want you to take care of me anymore.
I don't need you to take care of me. It's my responsibility. Like, not in these words, but like, it's my responsibility to take care of myself, and you deserve to go after the things you want in your life because I haven't been able to give those things to you. And to kind of underline the point, because at this point she's like, that's ridiculous. Like, I can take care of you. I'm the only one that can take care of you. He walks into the bathroom and pulls out something that we've seen in little bits throughout this movie, like a smidge of white powder in a water bottle. We've seen this pill bottle getting tossed around once or twice. We haven't paid much attention to it. Maybe it looked a little bit like the charcoal pill bottle, but like we haven't paid much attention to it. It was her coworker's Xanax. And she had been attempting to make him take ground up Xanax in order to make him feel better without his knowledge. And he's like, I'm not going to like freak out or get mad or anything, but this is kind of like exhibit A of why this isn't healthy. She's like, what's going to happen next time you have like this episode? Why are you doing this to yourself? And he basically says the mantra that they've all been saying this whole time, the discomfort's the point. Look, she's got a little patch. If you're watching the YouTube video, the tagline for this movie is the discomfort's the point.
It's such a good one.
I made a little bunch of merch patches for this movie. Yeah, and then the movie kind of ends. They don't stay together. I see that as a happy ending. Some people don't, but I do.
I was feeling a little sad after we finished the movie. For like the next 20 minutes, I was like, damn, like, that's sad. And it was really important and necessary because for both of them, they were not who the other needed in that phase.
So when we were shooting the movie, and I would be like, I'm literally going to die before this movie is completed. Katie literally threatened me with, if you die before this movie is completed, I'm going to change the ending and make them stay together. And I'm like, no. Katie's a big fan of happy endings and people staying together and working through their issues.
Another thing, you probably like did this on purpose, but in the end sequence when everyone is trying to help Tanner and figure out where he is and stop him from doing this like awful thing, ultimately Tanner is the one who saves himself. I'm sure you did that on purpose. Oh yeah, because if they bail him out, what was this all for? Yeah. You know? That was really spot on. Yeah, and then that's the long and short of the movie, that to be alive is to accept the non-zero chance of something awful happening. And you can't make other people carry that burden for you. And the more you try and get that perceived control, the more actually you realize that you don't have any control. And instead of going for that illusion of, oh, it will be okay once I do X, Y, and Z, we do have to surrender to like, yep, this is part of being alive and discomfort is the point. And that's literally all we can do. That's our movie. That's our movie. I put that on a Vimeo link and sent it to Juliet. Yeah. So what's the biggest takeaway for you? Like, out of all this? Well, yeah. So after watching all of these different OCD movies and then going back to the one that you created, what stands out to you about Exposure? Well, in context of all the other movies, I think just because it is mental illness, it's not relegated to one genre. I think we saw some really funny OCD comedies. Pure was hilarious. So funny. Matchstick Men was really funny, like unironically really funny. I'm a horror thriller guy through and through. I'm not that funny. And I wanted to kind of show my perspective of this issue in the way that I could do it. And that's horror, thriller, suspense kind of stuff. And I think all in all, I am still happy with the movie. I gotta be real, I was dreading watching it again because I'm like, I'm gonna find more stuff I hate about it. And, you know, like, I could talk for hours about, like in the very beginning, like we were talking about, like, oh, and then the next thing he does after he looks at the computer, I go, oh God, I see exactly where this is going. If we don't start moving it along, I'm gonna be like, oh, and then we lost light that day, so we couldn't get this shot. And, you know, like, all these things are still very, we had to cut this, cut that. I think number one, haha, I tricked you all into watching a year-long advertisement for Exposure with this podcast. I'm kidding. Number two, it's a nice way to kind of wrap up thinking about this project. I feel like that's what this podcast was in a way for me. It was like a nice way of like I'm working on a chapter. Yeah, I'm closing the chapter because I'm working on a different movie now. And this was like
3-4 years of my life. Not
Yeah.
like all of it all at once, but there's other things to explore about humanity and whatnot. And this next thing I'm doing is a monster movie, you know? Like, I want to have fun with it and not worry about like walking a line of acceptability in the bounds of doing something about mental illness, you know? Like, no, this is just a monster movie, you know? Like, fucking go wild.
I don't know. The monster community might have a lot of things to say.
That's true, you know?
You never know. Just like the Bungie community.
Just like the Bungie community. And if you don't get that reference, you have not done your homework. This podcast has been a lot of fun. It's been a way of kind of exploring what these other movies did. Obviously, hanging out with you, who lives 3 states away. I can't count.
Way more now. You're in LA.
We were 3 states away. Now you're 3 time zones away.
Literally.
This has been really special over this year.
Oh yeah. I mean, one thing that's been really fun about doing this podcast for me is I think a lot of times as mental health professionals sometimes do, like, you're so close to this in your work that sometimes you don't see the big picture because you're like so granular about like the DSM and the treatment and the diagnosis and the really important work. But it's also important to like zoom out and remember that like tons of people have OCD and tons of people have OCD and aren't able to seek treatment. And for them, maybe the only glimmer of awareness into that they could have OCD comes from like watching one of these movies. And also, it's just been so fun to get to like talk about OCD and do this with you because it's still very close to my heart, but it's also, as we've said, we're not a podcast where you should go for your big knowledge. Like, this is
right.
Mostly we're shooting the shit. We're talking about these things, but we're not trying to be something that we're not. And we're not trying to I don't know.
In a mental illness community where anxiety and despair are front and center for so long, it's fun to make a podcast where we bullshit about movies.
Yes. It's great. And we can also still be like, yeah, we're advocating.
Sure.
Yeah, but it's been so fun doing this with you.
Yeah, it's been great. Do you want to give the outro one last time?
Yes. Thank you all for listening to Intrusive Plots. Once again, you can find us on Instagram at intrusive_plots. You can also find me on Instagram as OCD therapist Juliet, or you can check out my Patreon, which is a lived experience community for people with OCD. Peter, tell them where they can find you.
I'm Peter. I wrote and directed this movie we talked for a while about. You can find it on streaming. You can probably find it in countries outside of America. Like I said, I'm not going to check. You can follow me on petercannon.film on Instagram if you want to follow the next film project. That's it. That's what we got.
Thank you, plotters.
Thanks, plotters. Thanks for being on. Thanks for plotting with us, you know?
Yes.
All right,
All right.
bye.
Bye.